Hey, Kath, it's Wendy Wollner. I'm thrilled to be here today. And I am in awe of the impact that you recently had on an audience. So I'm just going to throw it over to you and say, tell me how come you're so inspiring and so impactful, and what are people loving about you?
Oh, well, first and foremost, thank you so much for having me. It's a real thrill, and I'm so stoked that my story got heard or reached you in the way that it did. So, thank you very much. What makes me inspirational and impactful? I'm a very accidental motivational speaker. I never envisaged that I'd be spending time on stages around the world, sharing my story, etc. It was a chance kind of situation. My life took a turn and led me down a path of a lot of different roller coasters, to be honest, where I had this really, I guess, condensed patch of adversity after adversity after adversity. And it was the triumph over that adversity that has now led to a global movement called Kindness Factory, which I speak about on stages all around the world, about what happens in the brain when we're in a kind state, i.e. we've given or received kindness, and how that can impact us personally, but also the people around us, some of the people that we know quite well, but also some people that we might not have even met yet via acts of kindness. And so I think lots of people, kindness inspires kindness. And when they see that in action, people are inspired to do more with it. And potentially that's it. I'm not too sure what the magic source is about what makes me so inspirational or inspiring for people to want to hear my story, but it's been a really cool journey to be a part of so far.
So super interesting, right? I mean, I love the whole science of kindness. But, Kath, if you wouldn't mind, take us back to your story. What
Yeah,
happened?
of course. So I'm from Australia, you can probably tell via my accent. I'm from a very remote country town called Finley. So it's not really even on the map. Population 1,500, so not a big place whatsoever. I've got three older brothers, so I'm one of four kids and the youngest and only girl. And so I grew up, in the backyard playing with my brothers. And we very quickly bonded over the sport of cricket. And when I speak in America, I always sort of say it's kind of like baseball, but a little bit better. It's a global game. And I, at a very early age, identified that I wanted to play cricket for Australia. That's all I ever wanted to do. And I got pretty close. I ended up representing New South Wales. That's the state that Sydney's based out of. And did pretty well to get to that point. I was paid to do that professionally. I traveled the world doing that. And not long into my professional career, I actually broke my back for the first time. So freakish kind of accident. I was paralyzed. I was told that I'd never walk again and got a permanent paraplegic diagnosis. I subsequently went to rehab for 12 months to teach myself how to walk again against all odds. And it was there that, in a really good turn of fate, I ended up meeting my partner, Jim, who was a rugby player, and he'd injured his spine as well. So there we were, very similar age, very similar mindset, very similar challenge, ultimately, of teaching ourselves how to walk again. And we quickly grew to fall in love together, which was pretty bizarre, to fall in love and find love in a rehab centre. It certainly wasn't something that I was seeking or looking for, but the most magical experience of my life to date. We were going out for 12 months. Our rehab journeys had both come full circle and we were both walking independently. And at the 12-month mark, the day before Jim's full-time release from rehab, he passed away via suicide, which just left me as a 22-year-old feeling completely lost, vulnerable, afraid and alone in the world. I'd lost this dream that I'd wanted since I was a little girl, to play cricket for my country, and then lost the person that taught me that there was so much more to life than hitting a ball around a park. And I hit rock bottom in a multitude of different ways. Emotionally, as I said, I felt quite alone, lost, vulnerable and afraid, not through a lack of support. I've always had a great support network of family and friends and even strangers who'd cared enough to help me, but potentially I was probably a little bit afraid of my inner dialogue, like what was going on if I had to say all these words out loud. How on earth could I possibly overcome these challenges that I was experiencing? And it was through small acts of kindness that really propelled me forward. I was in a wheelchair one day and I couldn't reach the lift button. And a random stranger, it was like just centimetres out of reach, and a random stranger walked past. He saw that struggle and he pressed the button for me, and it meant absolutely nothing to his day but everything to mine, because I could get downstairs and do what I needed to do next. And it's through those periods of adversity that the thing that I noticed most was small acts of kindness that people were doing for me to help me get by. And so through lots of different science that led to what's now a global movement, namely gratitude. I remember at my rock bottom moment one day sort of sitting down at a coffee table, and I genuinely never thought I'd ever be happy again. That was my genuine belief. I was like, how on earth do you overcome these two big challenges at such a young age and be able to be okay with that? And I was sat down at a coffee table, and it was there for a shopping list. There was a piece of paper and a pen. And I don't know why, but for whatever reason, I had a moment of reflection where I thought, you know what, I've been lucky enough to be blessed with lots of different people who have helped me in my life to get me from A to B and to propel my journey forward. And I started writing down their names on this list of paper. One name turned into 10. And the next thing I knew, there's about 30 names on this sheet of paper. And at my rock bottom moment, I remember holding that piece of paper in front of my face and saying, Kath, if nothing else, this is 30 reasons to keep going. And that was really the turning point for my journey after those big life hurdles. It was gratitude. And at a brain-based
Kath,
level...
can I just jump in for a second, though? Like, aside from the wow, right? Like,
Sure.
and let me, express my condolences and my sincere, just there's no words, right?
Sure.
But for what I do for a living, what I'm interested in, there's something in Kath that sat down and said, I'm going to make a list. I'm not going to give in to the despondence, the grief, which is all real, legitimately, like super real, right? This is not like I don't like my nail polish, So if you wouldn't mind, because I think that's where people are really struggling, that first thought of, I might have thought of doing it, but you did it.
Yeah.
Can you help me and people understand, how did you do that? What happened in your brain that said, okay, come on, Kat, was it tough love? What was it?
It's a really hard question to answer, and this is a common question I get asked when I'm on stage all the time at the end of a keynote. And the reason I can't really answer it, but can in a way, is that this is what works for me. So I'm driven internally and innately by the goodness of others. And so I knew that trick would work for me. So as soon as I had the idea, it popped into my head. I'm like, you know what? I've written this list down. I'm actually going to now call every single person on that list because I truly felt grateful to have them in my life. And that was the call to action. So it wasn't simply just writing the list down. That was the first step. The second and most important step was, I'm going to call every single person on this list to say thank you for being a part of my life and for helping me. And I'd encourage anyone to do it. Like, if gratitude isn't a value of yours, rethink that. It should be. But, and I'd encourage everyone to actually take the opportunity, adversity or not, to do that experience. Write down a list of maybe 10 people that have influenced your life. Reach out, let them know life is bloody short. We don't know if we're not going to get that opportunity. But if gratitude isn't, in your top 5 values, for example, think of something that is. Could it be kindness? Could it be wellness? Could it be perspective? Could it be empathy? Whatever that is for you, and action that. And I think, one of my favorite quotes is, the world is changed by your example, not by your opinion. And I've got a great story of how that sort of come about, which I can share at the end of this. But for me, that just means action. How many times do you hear about that person who gets the cancer diagnosis and they go on to climb the mountain or write the book or tell someone that they love them that they wouldn't normally do because they're not courageous enough? And I think it's those moments that we often wait for adversity to strike before we action those bolder moments that spring us into action, and we don't have to wait.
But Kath, let's make it a little tough here because we have limited time. I could spend days and days and days and days talking to you, but I'm going to be your kind of worst heckler in the room, right? And I raise my hand and I say, no, Kath, you don't know my life. It's harder than that.
Yeah.
There's nothing I can do. You don't understand how hard it is. I don't like, there's nothing I can do. My life is just predetermined and it stinks. And we could put another word in there, but we won't for the sake of the podcast. What do you say to me? What do you say to that?
The only person getting you, and this is the thing I had to realize in rehab when I was feeling sorry for myself, the only person getting yourself out of the situation that you're in right now, if it's adverse, is yourself. So no one's going to do that for you. we can't afford to sit in a victim mentality for too long, regardless of context and situational crises that we may sit in. There's only one person that is responsible for your future, and that is yourself. As harsh
I
as
love
that
it.
sounds.
No,
Yeah,
that listen, in our country, we say that's tough love.
yeah,
And
sure. Yeah.
there's a message, right? It's a tough love, right? But so it sounds to me like you would say that idea of being assertively, lovingly assertive back to someone is helpful.
This is what I like to say to a lot of audiences. That's the difference between being nice to yourself and between being kind. So nice is passive and easy.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
a great story of this, I'm going to tell it in story form. So day 6 of my rehab journey, easily the hardest, without a doubt, of the 12 months I was there. It was tricky because I was overwhelmed by my environment. I didn't really know who to turn to, who to ask for help, etc. And my best friend, Erin, is the strongest woman I know. And she's a great example of tough love, if that's how you're going to reference it. I thought, she's the person closest to me in my life from a peer-to-peer perspective. I'm going to give her a call. So I gave Erin a call and I could barely get the words out. Like I was absolutely struggling with my environment. But I did. And I said, Erin, can you come and pick me up from rehab? And she was really confused. She said, what do you mean you're in rehab for the next 12 months? I was there visiting you yesterday. And I said, I know, Erin, if, my health deteriorates as a result or a consequence of you coming to pick me up and allowing me to leave this environment, so be it. But this is not a challenge that I can push myself towards. It is too great for me. Everyone's telling me it's never going to happen, i.e. I'm never going to walk again. And I don't think I've got it in me mentally and physically to overcome this. And I'll never, ever forget what she said to me. She said, Kath, you are my best friend. There is nothing in the world that I would not do for you. If I could trade places with you, I would in a heartbeat, but I can't. And as your best friend, that absolutely kills me to say. Here's what I'm going to promise you, though. If you pick up the phone at any hour of the day, I will answer that phone. I'll come in, I'll hold your hand, and we'll take those steps together. And that's the difference between being nice and between being kind. Nice is passive and easy.
You're making me cry, Kath.
Yeah, nice is, of course, I'll come and pick you up because I can see that you're struggling and I don't want to see that pain, even though it's to the detriment of your health. Kind is absolutely not. It's tough love, right? It's rooted in truth, honesty,
Love
but
it.
also compassion as well. We need to, these strong or soft skills that we're often referring them to, compassion, empathy, kindness, etc.
But really, they're the hardest skills, right? The name is so messed up because it's the hardest thing to do is to be kind.
We call them strong skills. Yeah, I consult on this stuff all around the world, and we call them strong skills
Yep.
because they're rooted in truth and honesty, and they're very hard to execute and to action. And I think that's the difference between, we call it niceness and kindness, but that's tough love, right? It's love, absolutely, but it's rooted in truth, honesty, and compassion. And I always sort of say to people, if you have the opportunity to have a conversation like that with a person in your life, it's absolutely going to take it out of you without a doubt because you're having to be that rock for that person. But I guarantee you that is absolutely what they need to hear in that moment. And for me, it meant everything.
So, again, first of all, let me just say to those who are listening, I reached out to Kath totally blind saying, I heard you're like amazing. I need to talk to you. And I think 3 minutes later you responded. So I can just say you live, eat, and work. You are this person. You are 100% authentically one of the kindest speakers I've ever worked with. And I'm 25 years in. So thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you very much.
But I would like to end with, you must have down days, right?
Yeah.
And I don't want you to overshare anything you don't feel comfortable. But if we fast forward to where you are today, do you date? Do you move on? Like, can you give us a little where Kath is now, if I'm not overstepping in my question?
Yeah, maybe it might help to set this up by sort of saying, the adversity wasn't over there. I, overcame that grief and loss and those tragedies. And I ended up actually recovering physically well enough to be able to compete in Ironman events. And I was training for that one day, and I was actually cleaned up by a drunk driver. So I got hit by a drunk driver while on my bike and broke my back again, and woke up from a coma 2 months later to news that I was paralysed and told I'd never walk again for the second time in my life. So the tragedy wasn't over. I had to go back to rehab for 6 months to teach myself how to walk again against all odds, which then led to a journey around Australia for 2 months with nothing but the clothes on my back. So no cash, credit card, food or water. In order to survive, the rules were I could only accept the help and kindness of strangers. And as I said, I traveled for 2 months to every single state in Australia. It's a big country, almost as big as the US. So I met a lot of amazing people on that journey, which then led to a speaking career, book deals, etc. And I now do this all around the world. I've had relationships since Jim's passing. The first was pretty tricky to navigate. There was a lot of, fear about loss and opening up my heart again and all those sorts of things. I had a lot of psych intervention. So for 2 years, I went on a therapeutic journey. I was diagnosed with PTSD, etc. So I don't want anyone thinking, if they're listening to this, that, I've gone from these huge adverse experiences to, speaking on stages around the world, and there was nothing in between that made that happen. I had to sit through the tough days. I think I mentioned up top that gratitude is quite powerful for me. With gratitude, I think optimism is sustainable. So when I was having my low days and I was able to identify, for example, one thing that I was grateful for, I had something to look forward to, which automatically made me realize today's not that great. Tomorrow's probably not going to be that great either. And maybe in a week's time, it's still not going to be that great, but one day it will be. And I think that's what that allowed me to sort of have something to look forward to, which was fantastic. As I mentioned, I travel a lot. I touched down from Sydney to LA only 2 days ago, so I'm quite jet lagged and all that kind of stuff, which takes transition time and so forth. So there's lots of down days in between the goodness and things like that as well. But all in all, I'm probably the happiest, healthiest and most content I've ever been in my life right now, having overcome those big experiences. You couldn't pay me any amount of money in the world to change what I'm doing. The brain-based research that we're doing in the kindness space via a research institute globally has been fantastic. We've partnered with Kaplan recently to infiltrate the school systems via a kindness curriculum, which teaches 12 attributes of kindness to kids. And it is tougher for me now to have a bad day because I'm constantly surrounded by kindness. So anecdotes, people are sending me acts of kindness. We've had 7.5 million people record an act of kindness at kindnessfactory.com. I'm consulting to businesses around the world about how important this stuff is. And, I get to speak and share my personal story, but also some of the learnings that I've taken out of the adversities that I've been through, but then also upskilling myself in academia around this kind of stuff. It's a pretty, hard task to put me in a bad mood when I get to do that on the daily. We often talk about social media and algorithms. If you're clicking on some of the bad stuff, you're going to see more of that bad stuff. If you're clicking on the good stuff, you're going to see more of the good stuff. It's kind of like that for me. If I'm constantly surrounded by kindness, it's harder for me to have a bad day, but they do happen for sure.
So, Kath, we intend to send this podcast out as a gift to our listeners and our clients. I think there are really no words to say how truly inspiring you are.
I really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
You're more than welcome. And I want to thank you for sharing and for jumping on and reframing for us what I think a message that I think we can all agree, at least over here in America, we're struggling right now. Our anxiety is pretty high. And I think the reason I feel like your message is so important is the hope factor and the optimist factor is at such a low, and it's what we need in order to really make our lives the best possible that we could, right?
Yeah, I think with anything, like always, it always comes down to choice.
Yep.
So we need to choose to be kind. We need to choose a better life, a better path forward, and we need to choose to take action, to spark action. So that's on us.
Awesome.
The journey becomes.
You want to do a quick little plug for your website and your information? Go for it. We'd love to hear. How can someone hear more from you?
You can find me at kathkoschel.com. So that's KATHKOSCHEL.com. Or if you wanted to log an act of kindness, it's at kindnessfactory.com.
It was an honor having you jump on today. Thanks again, Kath.
Of course. Thank you very much.
This has been a production of Balancing Life's Issues, produced by me, Kai. Follow along with other BLI produced shows at balancinglifesissues.com. Got an idea for the show? email me, Kai, at balancinglifesissues.com. And be sure to follow and subscribe to this show wherever you listen to podcasts. Anything else to add, Miles?
Yeah,